Welcome back. We are MDEV1001. That's Mobile Data Management in the summer 2023 semester at Georgian, and it's week 6, part 2 of our broadcast and recording. And for this part, we're going to continue with what we did last time, which was put together our iOS application for authentication. Now, this was taking an inordinate length of time last time, and I'm really hoping whatever networking problems were happening before are not happening anymore. But you know what? Hoping doesn't do anything. We can hope all we want when it comes to computers. And typically, there's many things that can go wrong when we're kind of teleporting in or remoting in, a lot of times we say, into a remote system. There's many systems that come in between. So what we did was we reseeded our data and we ran the application last time, like we said. And this just maybe just, by the way, so what could be going wrong whenever you do this kind of thing? And in my experience, it could be a bunch of things. One thing is, which is most likely the case, is my Mac has slowed down and it needs to be restarted. Okay. Now, this is a deadly thing to happen when I'm remoting in. Why? Because it could take several minutes for me to restart and for it to give me access again, right? Because I'm using Google Remote Desktop. Anything could happen. I don't have eyes on what's actually happening on that screen, right, if I do this. So we may need to do this at some point, and if we do, if I decide that that's what we're going to have to do, if this is the thing that's causing the slowdown, which may be the reason, right, then we may need to restart the computer remotely and do it, all right? Although I was running pretty good earlier today. Again, doesn't mean anything. So what we want to do immediately is let's get some of those functions going. So what I did was I shared with you several gists, and to be preemptive, what I'd ask you to do is don't wait for me, right? Why don't you get those gists in place right now? Because I'm so slow doesn't mean you have to be so slow, okay? So what I mean by that is you can see clearly like this is really going slow, and I'm not sure if it's like my home computer or maybe there's something going on. One thing for sure I can tell you when I have this kind of slowdown, it could also be my data provider, Rogers, right? And one thing that you have to know about Rogers is it's operating even now on a bus system. And anyone know bus topology? Yeah? Yes? Am I wrong? I'm not wrong, right? It works on a bus topology. And so what happens is it's shared data, right? No matter what you do, no matter how much data you get, even with your entire neighborhood, pretty much, I'm probably on a single switch, somewhere close, equivalent to being in the same kind of switch in the neighborhood. And what happens is if someone is really using data in the neighborhood, right? Like, I don't know, downloading a movie or a game or something, like right now, let's say someone's downloading Diablo 4 in the neighborhood, right? Then they might be using a lot of bandwidth. Now, everyone's restricted. They have a bandwidth restriction, so they try and do those kind of things. But if a couple people are doing that, or let's say, for example, my wife, here's another possibility, which is more likely, she's on a conference call right now, and I have 50 megabits up, right? Well, I'm using some upstream bandwidth to come here from home, right? And so I'm eating some of that bandwidth, and even when I'm downloading something, I'm eating some of that bandwidth. And I'm looking at 524, and you know what seems to be the culprit in my mind? My son, who's probably gaming right now at 524 in the afternoon, right? Roblox, it's a big thing, right? So, how many? I have 2, but I've wired them all up. Yeah, I've wired them all up. I did home runs right to the router. Anyways, doesn't matter. None of that helps because it's you know what? I'm an old networking guy, and I know how Rogers is, and at the time, that's all that was available. Let's move on. I've got nothing against Rogers, except that they have sometimes weird service. Sometimes. I'm being nice. We have a Rogers person here. I can't say bad things. Right? Okay. All right. So we have a couple of things. I have a data view controller update, but I want to put in the new stuff first. So before we put the updates in, I want to go back to my register controller, and I have 2 things. I have a register controller and a login view controller. Please make those 2 new files. All right. So again, inside of Xcode, if Xcode can tolerate my my insanity. I want to right click here and I want to go new file, and I want to call this make a Swift file, which we're going to call the register view controller. So register view controller. So that's one thing. I want to make the register view controller, and let's make the other file right away because of my slowness. So right click and new file, and we're going to call this the new file, and we're going to call this the login view controller. Login view controller. Oh yeah, it's taking its sweet time. So here's something. Why don't I have a logout view controller? I mean, I have a register, I have login. Why not logout view controller? I mean, I could have that, right? But why don't I? Why don't I have that? Why didn't I program that thing? I don't need it, right? Because when I'm logging out, I'm actually going back to my login page. That's what I'm doing, right? So I've got these two empty files here, and there's some strategies we can use here. We could put this in another subfolder and a group, as an example, we call authentication. We're not going to do that here, but we could to organize our files. Maybe we'll do that next week when we have, or the week after when we have better, kind of bandwidth. But what I'm going to do now immediately is just grab these things. I'm going to go to the register view controller, and I just want to grab everything. So I'm going to go to raw, and I'm just going to Command A, Command C, and then go back to my Xcode and Command V, and there it is. There's my register view controller. And I'm going to talk about my register view controller in a second. I'm going to do now my login view controller, which is kind of the first thing that I want to do. I'm going to kind of destroy everything there. I want to go back to my folder, navigate away, back to my other gist, and I have a login view controller that I can see here as well. There are some things that I've done here that I want to discuss. And I know, like we mentioned earlier today, I cannot possibly go through every piece of the code with you, the piece of the puzzle, if you will, right? Because we just don't have time. But I'll cover the highlights of what I did, right, to kind of talk about this. So those are the two, login view controller, and I also have my register view controller, okay? Now let's get the updated file before we move on, before I do any connections. The updated file is going to be only my data view controller. That's the one thing I modified. And if we go back a couple steps here, you can see that I have my updated data seeder file. We did that one. Then there's the data view controller.swift file. This one, I just called it ICE6 data view controller.swix. So you can look at the old gists that are there and see the difference. So again, the easy thing to do is just copy everything and paste over the other one. Okay, that's the easy thing to do. I recommend it. So again, Control A, Control C, go back to this one. When it feels like going, come on, little pokey. It's gonna come when it's coming. Hopefully it won't crap out again. There we go. And then all right, let's see if it actually did it. So I wrote down, up new for ICE6 or something like that. If we see those kind of comments in here, then we did it. Like this one here, this new for ICE6 function right here. All right, so we've kind of copied everything, I think, and I'm just going to go here to back up to Chrome for a second, and I'm just going to, look at my other gist just to make sure that there's nothing else here, because those are the ones that I wanted to copy. And that's why I also do it. I do it for a couple reasons. I do it because just in case I have a problem like this, I can give you instructions on doing it yourself, okay? And I think I got everything now, so we don't need this anymore. We can close this off. Goodbye. All right, so let's go over, first of all, what I've done before we connect to the storyboard. And in order for me to do that, I'm going to go back to my iTerm, and I'm going to put this up on GitHub one more time, because I'm a finicky kind of guy, and I worry. You know, the guys at work, they always tell me, you know, Tom worries too much. Tom worries too much, they say to me. And I'd rather over-worry than under-worry. That's for sure. So here it is. I'm going to say git add dot, git commit minus m, and we'll say added changes for ICE 6, git push. There we go. So all those changes and deletions and everything else are up. They've been pushed to GitHub. I'm safe. That means worst case scenario, I can always revert back to this state that I'm in right now. Okay? Now, warning, we are not in a working state. Okay? And the reason we're not in a working state is I haven't modified my storyboard. But before we get there, let's start looking at my register page. So one thing I want to do is, like I said, I want to register a new user. We cannot register a new user without what first? What are we missing? Huh? A user model, right? And here's the user model. Look at first name, last name, email, username, password, confirm password, right? Does confirm password, is that part of my user model? No. So it means I only need first name, last name, email, username, and password. And to get a good fix on it, right, when it comes to creating the user model, if you scroll down, you can see that the new user model is using this user, which doesn't exist. It gives you this user doesn't exist error, okay? So that means we need to go back to this point, and we're going to make a brand new entity. Okay, so see where it says down here, add entity. We're going to click add entity, and we're going to change the name of the entity by clicking once and clicking again, and change it to user. The user entity initially is going to have no attributes, 0 attributes, right? Like right here. We can hide the relationships right now. We don't need them. But we do need the attributes. And the first attribute I'm going to add in is first name, all lowercase, because we're sticking with that, although we don't need to. The type is going to be a string. So that's going to be the string type, right? And then I'm going to add another one, last name. Also going to be a string. By the way, order does not matter here. And then the next one is going to be password. And that's also going to be a string. Now here's a problem. And I want to mention this. This is not a, remember I mentioned before, this is not a security course. But is it good to store my password the way I'm storing it right now? Why? What should I be doing? I should be? Encrypting. Encrypting, which is I need to serialize my password and deserialize my password. I'm not doing that. We're not a security course. All I care about is functionality right now, okay? But later on, we may go back and say, hey, maybe we need to encrypt this somehow. This is no good, okay? But I'm talking about it because I know it's there. Okay, username is the next one. We need to salt, using salt and pepper, that creating a hash is what you're talking about, is just one method of password hiding, if you will. And all it does is it creates this massive amount of data. It looks like huge. Your password, that could be 6 characters, looks like it's like 256 characters, right? And it's like, that doesn't make any sense, right? And what they do is they use a method where they take the characters and the date, time, computer, blah, blah, whatever, a bunch of different things, and they come up with a hash. And they use basically a hash table to come up with extra characters per character. And then they move things around randomly, some other randomness that they do. And they have something called the salt and the pepper typically. Salts usually is only one, is enough. And the salt, what it does is you can use the salt to decrypt the password. That's what they use, right? Salt is like your key. Like your, I don't know, the key to open the door to tell you what this thing is, right? It's like a password for the password, is what I always like to see it. All right, well, we don't have that. And then email address, I think is what I called it, email address. Let me just make sure that that's true. I'm going to go back to register, and we can see if it's, no, it's just email. Username, password, email, first name, last name. Okay. Email. We're at the creation stage, so that's okay. Email. Okay, and we need to make it a string. So this is the thing. They're all strings, and by default, there isn't an easy way to do it here. And it'd be nice if you could say, this is a password, give me a new data type, password, right? It should be kind of like, that would be really cool if you said, like, I'm using the password 1 data type or password 256 data type, and it would just like take care of all the encryption for you, right? But unfortunately, it's left up to you to do, right? Because everyone has different fears about how to make things work. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties or attributes. And we should always check to see if we have the same number here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're looking good. But still, there's this issue that says, cannot find user in scope. Why? Why does it say that? We haven't run it. We haven't run it, and it takes time for it to propagate, is the answer, right? Just because you made it doesn't mean it's already there automatically. It's going to be there, all right? So just don't worry about it for now. That's number one. So first we make our, we have to make our entity. And so for next week, this is kind of one of the tasks you're going to need to do for your test. You need to probably make a brand new entity that has nothing to do with movies, because I'm not going to give you the movie data. It's going to be some other data. All right? Okay. So that's the first thing. So the next thing is, now that we have that and we know that this is the case, what does register do? So register is going to have a bunch of different fields. We don't have these fields, but we're going to make them in a second, right? And so we need our first name or last name, an email address, a username, a password, and a confirmed password. So what I programmed was this. You put in your password and your confirmed password. If there's nothing missing, so first it checks, do I have every field kind of set? And so here it says, username, password, email, first name. It kind of gets everything from the your items, your text fields, right? And it says, hey, if username is not empty, if password is not empty, and email address is not empty, but that's okay. Those are the ones I really care about. We can return. Otherwise, if it doesn't have one of these, right? One username, password, or email, it'll fail. First name and last name are optional. Right? And why? Because that's kind of part of your profile, but I'm not going to make it required. Also, things that we can make it so that extra protection is back over here to the XC model. Remember that we can also look at the model itself, the entity. And there's some information about the entity here, right? But there's also information about each of these things, right? That's, that if we go to this, right? When if officially it goes there one day. There we go. You can see that the type is there, the name, and then it says optional, right? So question, email, should it be optional? No, uncheck that, please. Email should definitely be not optional. First name and last name, I'm making optional. Password, definitely not optional, okay? And then username, not optional. Look at some of the other things that you can put in there. One is transient, allows cloud encryption. There's a default string that we can use, and then minimum sizes and all this kind of stuff. We're not going to do any of these right now, but there's some things we can talk about when it comes to password, right? So password itself, and the allows cloud encryption and what that does for us if we're going to do it. Okay, so that's kind of something you can do. So we made them so that, again, email, username, and password are not optional, but first name and last name are. That's, in effect, what we're saying is that email, username, and password, not null, is what we're saying, right? Back to that SQL statement that we had before. So that's first thing. Next, back to this. So we configured everything. That's nice. And we know that we're going to have these things. And what I'm doing is, after we check to see that there are inputs for username, password, and email, if I know there's inputs for those things one day when it decides to move on, there we go, then the next part for us is to continue to check. Sorry, I'm skipping. I'm going to do a fetch request. And basically what I'm saying is, hey, fetch the username and email And what I'm doing this for is to check to see if the user already exists. What if I try and register a user that's already there? It shouldn't be allowed. That's what I'm doing. So one thing I've put in here is that you can't enter a user that's already been there, that's already been registered. So first I see if user is empty. So I'm trying to get the user that I want, all right? And I'm looking for that username and password. I'm kind of doing a bit of a search, right, to see if the username and password already exists, right? And if it does, so if this fails, then it's going to give you a little bit of so if it's not empty, it's basically going to say something like, you know what, registration failed. One thing is I have here is passwords do not match, okay, but let me just continue to go down here. Else is what we're looking for. Registration failed. A user with the same username or email already exists. Question, security. You guys are security. Should I say that? Should I say that username and password already exists? User experience, what does it say? Yes, right? Security says no, because if I tell you that the user already exists, what are you going to do? Hammer me with another user until you find something like this. If you know the user exists, woohoo, now I'm halfway to cracking the user, right? I know the user exists. Remember, the biggest vulnerability in a system is us. We're the biggest vulnerability, right? So programming something like this where it says user registration failed, a user with the same username or email already exists, in a real world scenario, for us, it's for testing. That's why I put it there. But in reality, I would just say registration failed. We wouldn't tell them why it failed. We're going to tell them it failed. They can figure it out for themselves why, all right? Same thing if you try and log in and I say incorrect username and password. Should I say that? No, I should say login failed. You don't know why. Login failed, right? And they can guess which one it is. Is it username and password, right? Telling them that's the problem, that's on me. I'm the programmer. I should never tell people or lead them to tell them what the problem is. I can just say that there's a problem. That's good enough. Even that's a lot. All right, so now that's one thing it does. So the first thing is, do we have the same user? If we do, we're going to say it failed. If we don't, the other option might be, here's the next problem. Then the next problem might have, is the password in the confirmed password field the same? If I'm registering a user and I put the password, let's say 12345, and the next password is 123456, they don't match. So did I make a mistake? Did I forget to put the 6? That's why we have password and confirmed password, right? So we should try and confirm that that's what the user wants, because once they have their password in, they have it forever. One thing else we don't have included in our little system that I'm making with you is a reset password utility. I don't have that, right? That is some piece that is missing. Again, this is not a security course. You don't have a profile. If I was going to make a profile with you, I'd add a picture, I'd add other things, password, email confirmation, back and forth to your email address and all that email relay. We're not doing that right now. But if I was going to do it, I would make it so that you could reset your password. And we don't want the user to reset their password ever. Here's something that's going to happen. In a real world scenario, you call the help desk and you say, hey, help desk, can you read me my password? And they're going to say, no, I cannot read you your password. Why? Because it's hashed. None of it is visible to them, right? Or it should be anyway, right? And although I can tell you that some universities can read you your password, which is really weird. Makes me cringe. Like you're sharing password information with them. Is this your password? And I'm like, who the hell am I talking to, right? They have my password. And that could be one of my important passwords because, hey, we're all lazy in this world, right? And we use the same goddamn password over and over again. Once they got my password, they got my password for everything, right? Not true.
Lists and lists of passwords.
Because of user experience. Because it's too hard for us, right, to keep on, a really difficult password. So, how many people can remember their credit card number or or how many people can remember their 10 digits of pi? How about that? Can you remember 10 digits of pi? Come on. 10. I want 10. Who can remember 10 digits of pi? 3.14159, right? 26. 535. Yeah. 535. Yeah. So it's like something like that. But you should think about that. If you can remember 10 digits, Can you remember easily some random numbers and random letters? Like K, J, capital 5, capital M, lowercase g, all these kind of weird things they give you, like complex password?
I like capital 5.
Yeah, the answer is capital 5. The answer is no. We can't remember I can't remember capital 5, okay? We can't remember this stuff. That's the answer, right? So what do we use? We use password managers for this kind of thing. And of course, password managers can be cracked, or you can lose the password to the password manager. So what do? They put it in a notepad, in unsecure location, right? Or a sticky note.
Right on top
Yeah.
of the screen. That's the good one.
Yeah, security. So again, that's why we're using confirm password and password. We want to make sure that the user is registering a password that they can remember, okay? And then finally, if everything goes well and we've done all that stuff, we can, do the security. We want to register a new user. Oops, sorry, I jumped. We want to register a new user, and what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate. I love that word. We're going to instantiate an object of type user, and we're going to pass in the context object, which is inside of the app delegate. The app delegate points to the data store that's inside, which is our core data. All right, that's what it does. Okay, so the app delegate. So we say, hey, I want to make a new user. The new user initially is empty. It doesn't have any of its attributes, with any kind of data. And then what we're doing is we're allocating data to each of the attributes based on the data that we're getting from the form. Remember, the form is we're getting string data. And so I'm just going to go up here. This is where we do that. When we say username, password, email, first name, and last name are strings we're getting from the form data. We're storing it in these variables. And then down in here, whenever it feels like going there, it's going to be interesting making our UI. Then it does this. It actually creates, it allocates the data from the form into our new user object. And then it tries to save the context, which means it flushes the data. And back in the old days, we called it flushing the buffer. We would flush the buffer of data, and the data would be stored inside the data store. That's what would happen. Okay, it would go somewhere. It would direct itself. Now I have this other thing here, which is login view controller shared clear login text fields. Right? So why did I do this? Well, the same problem that I had last time when it came to going back. Whenever I go back, I want to, for the table that we had before, I want to reload the data in the table, right? And I can't use view will appear because the view hasn't disappeared. It's just one view on top of the other view because I'm using segues still. I'm not using a navigation controller. If I was using a navigation controller, that would be different, all right? But we're not doing that, all right? Navigation controller, that's outside the scope of this course. That's something that your friend, your professor from iOS is teaching you, right? Anyways, so then we can't do that, and so we need to make a reference to the login view controller, and I've created a shared property on the login view controller, which is a reference to the login view controller itself, and then I'm clearing what I'm doing is I'm clearing login text fields. So that means username and password are being cleared when you go back there. So it doesn't show your old username and password because nothing is going to clear that. It's your form you're creating, right? You have to control every aspect of that form, including what's in the username and password fields. So we're clearing that here manually. And then I'm dismissing. Dismissing takes me back from the registration controller back to the login controller. And then I can log in. I had an option, by the way, when I was thinking about, when I was putting this together, should I log the user in manually myself or automatically when I register? And the answer is no, I'm not doing that right now. And I could, but I want to test to see if my login works, right? And that's why I didn't do it. Okay, so then the alerts that I'm doing are going to pop up these little pop-up. They're like messages or, like I said, toasts before on the Android side. I also have a cancel button pressed just in case you decide not to register. Okay. So that is the registration form. The login form, let's go there for a second. Login field. Login form is going to have a username and password, right? Again, we're going to have a reference to the static shared login view controller that we're getting before. I'm also going to set the login view controller shared is equal to self. So this is where I actually assign the reference to the login view controller. So this is neat because this is a public static field. Okay. Let's go back to public and static. What does public static mean? What does static mean, class-wise? Indu.
Static means it will be constant.
Nope. Constant is not static. Constant and static it's the same. It's kind of the same, but what's the difference between static and const? I can use the class itself without instantiating, right? I can use a class, an instance of a static instance, without instantiating, right? Which means I can have a bunch of static members that I can activate without instantiating the class, right? Otherwise, I have to instantiate an object of that type of class and then do it. A good example of this is if I was going to make some kind of I'm just trying to think of, I don't know, X and Y coordinates, I'm thinking, a vector, all right? Let's say I make a vector class, right? And my vector has X and Y coordinates, and I want to do vector addition. I could have it so that when you instantiate, you can say my vector dot add new vector, or whatever. And that's how you would do it for Java, and you would also do that here. In C++, we can actually overload the plus operator, or whatever, and I missed that. But anyways, I digress. Right? Here you can't do that. So you could do that. Or you could say capital V vector for the class if you made it a static function to add, so that you don't have to instantiate. You can just say vector.add and then vector A plus vector B. And you add those things together, and then it returns a new vector. Right? That static function is something that is very common. And we have public static functions as well as private functions as well as public functions. Those are all different kinds of functions that we can have in a class. I made this static because it's like making it kind of global in some ways, right? It's not quite a global. Okay, on that, here is something of a real path digression. Let's talk about digression here. We're going to really digress here, okay? What if I wanted to store my data, instead of passing my data around the way I'm doing it, what if I made a static class? The whole class is static, public and static, right? Well, I can't really do that to a class. But what if my class is only a container and everything inside of it was static? So really, it's just a container class, and everything else is kind of like I'm using the class as a namespace. That's what kind of I'm doing. I'm saying this whole container here, everything, exactly. Everything inside here is just global, right? And people do that a lot, right? Yeah, they do that a lot. They do that. They kind of make it so that everything inside that class is static. Problem with this approach is it's not thread safe. So if you ever try to do multi-threading applications or anything like that, it's not good. That's not good at all, right? So we try not to do that. A better approach, still problematic, is the singleton. Okay, let me talk about the singleton for a second and talk about this here. Let's see if I can do this. Actually, I'll do this on my Windows machine just because it's going to chug. Singleton, all right? So if I was talking about, I said last time I was talking about the design patterns. So if I say design patterns, and it says, the first thing that comes up is, I've looked this up so many times, elements of reusable code, which is this part right here. This is design patterns. And this is this famous book I was talking about. It was written by the Gang of Four, which is Eric Gamma, Richard Helm, Ralph Johnson, and John Vlasidis, right? And these people in 1994 published this book, which is a famous book now for computer scientists like yourselves. Even though you're mobile application developers, I always consider you guys computer scientists when you're in my class, right? And they published 23 design patterns, and they broke the patterns down into creational, structural, and behavioral patterns. And these are similar patterns that we see when we, when we code over and over again. And these four guys got together and we keep on solving the same damn problem. We just keep doing it over and over again. Can't we give a standard or best practices to do this problem? And so they have these solved problems, and they propose solutions to these problems, okay? So if we look at creational for a second, let's take a look at creational. So creational design patterns are factory, okay? That's one. And if you look down, there's one called singleton, okay? So factory is interesting. If I was going to make a bullet factory, all right, or let's do a car factory, bullet factory, gaming. Car factory, right? The car factory I could come up with, and it might have different features. Like some cars would have, a blue color, other cars would have a red color. Some cars would have 3 wheels, India. Greece too. Lots of cars with 3 wheels in Greece, right? And some cars would have 4 wheels. Some cars would have 6 wheels, right? And some cars with 6 wheels might be considered a truck, right? All of these things are basically still a vehicle, They're still a vehicle class, but the factory design pattern allows you to create different, it kind of configures the object for you instead of you having direct access to the new keyword. So in other words, I go to the factory and I say, hey factory, give me this. And then what it does is it does all the configuration for you in the background. It's a black box, and it comes up with a perfect object for you configured the way you want it, okay? That's factory design pattern. And the reason, what problem that solves is, instead of me coming up with the same thing over and over again, so I have a class that's called red car, blue car, green car. Instead of doing that, right, you have a factory that does any kind of car you want, right? So that's factory design pattern. We use factory method pattern, and you guys should all learn how to use the factory method pattern. It's one of the staple patterns, I would say, in almost anything we do. You're using it in Java for sure, if you're programming in Android, right? Yeah, you have to do it. The factory pattern used everywhere, right? The other one is singleton. And the singleton, what it says here, it's kind of like a single source of truth. The single source of truth where it's like a static class, right? But what it does is it doesn't allow you to instantiate the object more than once.
The opposite of that.
Yeah, so it's like, I call the singleton, and when we call a singleton in C++ or in C#, what we do is we make I'm saying those two languages because they're the clearest, right? What we do is we make the constructor function private. So we don't allow a user to instantiate an object at all. They can't use the new keyword at all with it, right? Similar to factory, okay? But the difference is we have a instance method, all right? The instance method is public and static. And that instance method is the doorway into the class. We must go through the instance method to get access to everything else. So the way it would look at, let's say I made a class, as an example, called game controller. I would say game controller, capital G, so I'm actually calling the class, right? Because it's a public static. Game controller dot instance dot, or in brackets, if you call the function, dot, and then whatever function I want, right? Singletons are really great for things like objects that we only want to have once. Example, I have a database class that accesses the database. There's only one of those, right? I have a game manager that manages the entire game. I don't want to have more than one of those, right? So whenever you want to guarantee that there's only one instance of that class, you use a singleton design pattern, right? Singleton design pattern is also, it breaks the single responsibility principle. Whenever we talk about object-oriented programming, we talk about solid, right? Which is, one of the first one is the single responsibility principle, which means that every class has only one responsibility, does only one thing, right? Singleton solves two problems. It gives us a single point of access, right? That's the first problem it solves. And the second thing is, right, it stops us from having more than one instance. Those are two things that it solves. And that shouldn't be the case. It should only solve one problem. So in effect, it's got a flaw. Singleton design pattern, in some cases, is not thread safe. However, you can make it thread safe depending on the way you implement it, right?
Thread safer.
Yes, it is. And it's better than a static class, right? Because that's the way it is, right? However, singletons are overused everywhere. They use them for everything. And sometimes they even call them singleton, right? So you might see the class will be something like my game singleton dot instance dot, and then whatever you want to access, right? Or you might say something else. There might be other things.
They use for every feature.
Yeah, it's really terrible, right? So, and that's abuse, right? So we want to kind of keep our singletons small. We only need them when we guarantee only one instance of that class that we want to access. Again, database manager, network manager, a print manager, a score manager if I'm making a game, should be one, right? Scene manager, I want to move from one scene to the other. Shouldn't be more than one of those, right? All those things, one, okay? So that's creational. And you need to know that one. Structural, okay? If I was going to go and talk about anyone that you need to know from a structural perspective, it's the decorator pattern, all right? The decorator pattern is something that we use over and over again. And what it does, it's a modifier on a particular class, okay? We're not going to go into that too much. Then behavioral. We do use change of responsibility, but the big one for me is the observer pattern, right? The observer pattern you guys use every day, all day, whether you're in your car or whether you're accessing a website, we use it all the time. It's event management. Any kind of event handler uses the observer pattern, right? If I want to write my own operating system, or if I ever want to write my own game engine, I'm going to probably use the observer pattern, right, to make my own event handler. Add event listener is the observer pattern, all right? Okay, so that's what it does. State is the other one we use a lot. We use state machines for everything. State machines for different kinds of states. The login state, logout state. I might have other kinds of states. State machines are effective because we don't want to use a series of Booleans, right? Am I logged in? And am I also checked in? And do I also have access? And do I also have this and that and something else? Those are all Booleans. Those are all like little switches we have to turn on. We just want to have a single state that encapsulates all those things. One state. And usually we use enumerations for that, factor enums. Okay? So again, the ones I talked about, those are the big ones. And if you don't know observer, command pattern is another one. Command pattern is undo and redo. I want to remap my keys. I don't want to hard code my keys on a particular game example, right? I want to give the person to have left-handed access and right-handed access. I want to use the command pattern, right? Where I don't hard code the command, but I create a command class, right? That's how I do it. So command pattern, state pattern, and observer pattern, I would say the big ones. Why am I talking about these things? This is not part of our course. You're going to say, Tom, you've digressed, and you said it's not part of our course. It's part of my DNA. I have to talk about it every goddamn course I ever teach, because you know why? People don't use them. And you're going to see them. You're going to see them in Android. You're going to see them in iOS. You're going to see them everywhere, right? And many other ones are derived from this one. Example, the big one that you might see a lot is model view controller. That is a design pattern, right? So if you think about what that is, that's a separation of concerns, right? Where we want to try and separate things. Why am I doing that? Because we want to adhere to the single responsibility principle, right? So that every class does one thing, right? Okay. Digression over. Going back to real code now, all right? So why do I talk about these things? I talk about them because they're important to me, right? And they're important to me as a developer, not just as a professor, right? And we see them all the time in everything we do, okay? So again, when I look at something like this, I always cringe when I use a static something. And I cringe because I'm like, this could be done better. But I coded it because I have no time. Sometimes we just, my underlying principle with, that kind of underlies everything that I do when it comes to coding is make it work. I think I've told you that before, and I'll say it again. Make it work. I don't even care if it's ugly code. I don't care if you copied it from somewhere. I don't care. Just make it work, right? Because if your code doesn't work, who cares how pretty it is, right? There's other analogies I can use there. But it doesn't matter how pretty she is. Like I said, if the code doesn't work, it doesn't matter, right? She's got to be functional, right? And that's what I say, right? Or he has to be functional. Let's put it on that side as well, okay? If he's pretty and he's useless, who cares, okay? So that's how I think about it. And then it's easy to refactor. Make it work, then refactor. Why? Because refactoring, if you refactor as you go, by the way, this goes hand in hand with everything I do. Writing. Imagine if you made it pretty from the very beginning and you keep editing and editing and editing and editing your writing forever, you're never going to finish. Finish writing first, then refactor. Do your first draft. You got it written. You're halfway there, right? Imagine if you just keep writing that first chapter over and over and over and over and over, you're never going to finish. Your book is going to last forever. You're never going to, it's an unending thing to be perfect. You can't be perfect. And so just make it work. Finish your story. Get it out there. And then go back and review and review and review. You can review forever afterwards, right? Okay, so we talked about some principles here. So that's why this makes me cringe, static, because it could be a singleton. And maybe later on we'll do that, okay? All right, now I need some, after that long explanation and digression, I need some storyboard stuff. So let's get into this. Hopefully we can do this without too much disruption. I doubt it today. Today's one of those days, like I said, red nose and all. So I have these two controllers, and these two controllers are linked by a segue, right? So question for you is, I want to add another controller, the login controller, right? Let's do that. So I'm going to just type in view controller here. Oh, here's my view controller. I'm going to take this view controller. I'm just going to put it over here on the left side of the screen. Okay, here's my left side of the screen. Question. Should the view controller be first, second, third? What do you think it should be? If it's the login view controller, what do you think it should be? First. Well, see this little mark right here? This little mark over here tells us that the entry point for the application right now is favorite movies. That can't be anymore. The login view controller must be the first entry point if you need the person to log in every single time, okay? Like we did before, as soon as I have my view controller here, I want to go and configure my view controller, right? So my view controller itself, which is, click on this little mark right here. The class you want to choose is login view controller. So type it in if you need to, login view controller. And the other thing you want to do is you want to go back to this mark right here, and you want to click on is initial view controller. When you click on is initial view controller, the little arrow is here, right? Is initial view controller, which means this view controller starts. It's the entry point into your application, okay? Is initial view controller. Next, we want to add in the detail we need for this thing, okay? So I'm going to add in some kind of title, like for example this favorite movies thing that I had before. I'm just going to kind of close these off and see if I can do that without too much disruption. This is going to take all hour. I could have done this, we could have been done by now, all right? Sorry. It's my bad. All right, and I want to kind of make a couple things. I could put in a label by myself, all right? But I have an example of a label here, and I want to adhere to my standards, right? Remember, what I'm doing is, on the left in the outliner, not only am I dragging in an item, but I'm also like naming it properly, right? So that later on I can go back and take a look at my project and go, oh yeah, I understand, right? 5 years from now, I can look back and go, oh yeah, I get it, right? If I just put random stuff in here and don't rename the outliner, sometimes I'll get lost, especially when it comes to adding in constraints. You don't know what you're clicking on, right? So what I want to do is here on the right, because I want to adhere to the standard that I have here, I want to option drag from here into this controller over here. Okay, what this does is it creates a copy of my my label and maintains the style, right? So it's bold, it's 30 points or whatever I made it. It's going to keep that. It's going to save me time. So option drag does that. Okay, copies. And then I'm just going to open up my properties when it feels like doing it. And then I want to rename this here, instead of favorite movies, it's going to be, kind of like my app login. So here I'm going to rename this to app login, login, right? Maybe we'll call it something like movie app login, like that, movie app login. I want to still center it, so I want to kind of take the time to be able to position it on my screen, just so it's centered. I use the automatic guides that it kind of comes down, and then here on the left, what we want to do is we want to kind of click on and click again and rename this thing to movie app login label when it allows me to do so. Movie app login label. Okay, I know I'm going super slow and I do apologize. I would have been done by now, like I said. Maybe it's a good thing, who knows. Next, I want to have some text fields and some labels, and I have examples of these text fields and labels from somewhere else, right? And so strategy, I know where I have them, right? I have them over here, right? Now, caution, should I option drag my text fields? What are your thoughts? Should I option drag my text fields? You're saying no. Why no? Absolutely. I also copy the event, the little connection that I made. I don't want that. One thing connecting to something else. So, but I do want to copy some other stuff. So what I'm going to do is, just to make it quick, I'm just going to move this little view controller on the right-hand side, just so that way, just for my own sake. and zoom in, use my mini map here to kind of go into where I want to go into. Just zoom in a little bit so I can see the label, which is configured perfectly for me, right? So this label here, that's configured right. It's exactly how I want it, and it's also the size of my view screen, right, or my viewport. So I want to option drag that for sure. So I'm going to do kind of an option drag over here, and it's going to do it when it feels like it. Is it still cycling for you? Does it keep cycling? Oh yeah, look at that. Let's try it again. There we go. Now, once we have it, what it's done is it's made a copy, and we're going to call this the, come on. There we go. We're going to call this on the left, instead of title label, this will be the first name label. Okay? No, I do first name, last name, then the rest. That's what I do. But you can do it whatever you like. First name label, right? And then I want a brand new text field. And unfortunately, I haven't found a great way of doing this without because otherwise I get extra stuff. And, I get confused really easily. I'm a confusable kind of guy. It does, but I still want to input the entire entity, which is first name and last name. Right? So we can give the option for the user to put in their profile. Okay? Again, the good thing is we can probably do this once if I do it right, if I actually do it right, undo. And if I can actually zoom in, I do apologize, this is really annoying for me, guys. And if it's annoying for me, I'm sure it's annoying for you. I know how to do it, it's just, I'm trying to do too many things at once. Okay. So this is, one more time, come on. This is my first name text field. So first name text field. I know people don't like it when they see it. They're like, this is so wordy, Tom. Why do you do it? Right? Some people actually do text field first, then whatever it is. Text field and then first name. Text field or TXT and something else. And Rich will do that a lot. If you ever take him ASP.NET, he'll do the type first, and then he'll follow up by the name of the identifier. Why? Because if I type in TXT, all of them come up. So you can look at all the text fields, and you can decide which one, right? But if I type in first name, then I only get first, and I may not get the right thing. If I can't remember what it is, what the name is called, TXT, if I know that, if I call everything text fields, I'll see the first name there, right? So this is the first thing I've got, and now that I've got this, I want to change this. Instead of title, this will be first name. And what I want to do with this is do some configuration. So in the text field down here and below, I don't want to copy this. Notice it says content type is unspecified, right? So you can literally later on specify, like for example, give a name. You can specify that, right? And there's other things you can specify here as well. I'm not going to do that, but I will talk about it later. So let's copy paste. Again, I'm going to option drag these ones into a new set. So first name, last name. So again, in here, the only difference is you have to kind of go in here and change the name of the field. So this will be last name. By the way, if you're watching this video and I'm too slow, just speed me up. But we're going to probably go overtime today, guys. I'm so sorry. So last name text field, first name text field, and this should say last name whenever we can get there. We have a serious internet problem today. Okay. There we go. So first name, last name. Okay. We're going to keep doing this. And here's what I want you guys to do. Don't wait for me. Do username, password, and confirm password. You need those. And email. So the next one I'm going to do is email. right? So email, username, password, confirm password. So now that I have two, right, I'm going to select them all. So I'm going to go like, to save on time, I'm going to just select all these, and then I'm going to option drag It requires a special amount of patience to do this work, all right? Too much for me. So this is email label. And this is email text fields. So don't wait for me, do it, guys. And this is username. And this is username. All right, and then just rename everything the way it's supposed to be. So I'm going to go to email label and rename that to email address. And then this one will be username. Okay. Now I need password and confirm password. So again, I'm going to probably grab these two, the last two. And I'm going to option drag. Come on, little pokey. Hands off. Still doing its thing. Whenever it feels like coming back to life, it will. Oh yeah, it's chugging. Again, I'm not sure what it is, if it's the, yeah. So is it the computer? Is it, well, here's the way to check. Here's my godlike, whatchamacallit, computer. By the way, I call it godlike for a reason, right? Because I have an i9 10900K, 64 gigs of RAM, and RTX 3070. It's got liquid cooling and a lot of other great things. But, so if I can do this, and if I can see my, my mouse and cursor and all that stuff, this is another great way of testing whether or not I have access. So, so I can check if it's my computer or if it's my internet, right? And I can tell you right away if it's my internet and my computer, right? Because if this has issues, if this thing has issues, and here's where I was writing my little npm module, right? If this thing has issues at home, then I can tell that everything else has issues at home. See, that's much quicker. So it seems to be that it's the Mac. Again, I'm loath, I'll say this again, I loathe accessing the Mac and rebooting it, because I know that if I do that, we may never see it again in this lifetime. Yep. Can't get that wrong too many times. Back to this. All right. So let's try and move it again. Ooh. Tom. Slow computers. Drives me crazy. Like I said, if it drives you crazy, you can imagine me trying to do this. This is like 1985. All right. Good enough. So again, what I want to do is I want to call this, let's make it maximized. That's going to also slow it down, but I don't care. It's already too slow. And this will be the password label. And this will be the password text fields. You guys are all done, I'm sure, already? Eric, you done?
Technically, no.
You are done or not?
No.
Come on. I thought you'd be faster than me with my slow computer.
I was dealing with weird Git stuff.
Confirm password label and confirm password text fields. Technically, the confirm password label and confirm password text field are just a validation thing, and we don't really need it when we're registering. I like to use it, like I said, because I'm a nervous kind of guy. And now let's change the labels. So this should say password. Woo. And this is confirm password. There we go. Okay. So far, so good. We have our stuff. So far, not good, but we have our stuff. And is this the login that we're putting together or the register? Did we put the right thing in? Right? Because I've been doing like, the login view controller, but I'm actually putting the register information. Let's just change it so it's register, because that's what I'm doing first, clearly. It's a register view controller. And this should be register user. That's what this should say, not the login, movie app login label. This should be the register label. I'll be okay. That's me, kind of getting confused because of the whole internet slowdown thing that I'm experiencing right now, that you guys just are experiencing with me. All right? Could be a number of different things. This is where, I am. So this is the register label, and we're just going to change this thing right here eventually so that it says register user. All right, and let's just see if we can use the guides, like I said, and just slide it over there. Good. Okay, cool. Well, we want a couple of buttons that we already have. So are we missing anything? Well, we need a register button and maybe a cancel button, because maybe we don't want to continue, right? So, so now this is where we're going to test that theory out that my friend said. Well, we're going to get the events, right? So I'm going to grab the cancel button, and I'm going to grab the update button together, and I'm going to option drag them over here. Watch it crap out again. It's going to say the thing is not responding. Right? Are you seeing it cycling over there? Huh? Oh, it did it right the first time. I'm leaving it there. I'm not touching it, man. Okay? One thing I need to do is the button labels. Okay? So the button labels are wrong. This is not the update button, but rather it is the register button. And this should say register, not update. Wonderful, right? Register. So, I've kind of got everything here, right? Before I do my connections, I want to talk about some quality of life functionality, and that is all this stuff on the right that I had before. So again, if you go here and if you look at first your first name text fields, like I said, you want to indicate the type. I would put in given name. Okay? I want to go into last name text fields, and from a content type, I would put in the family name. Now, this doesn't work in all cultures. Some people have two last names, right? Especially our Hispanic folks from South America, right? Or even from Spain. They have their mother's last name and their father's last name together into one name, right? So this doesn't always work. And so we have to be careful, and we have to think about, does it make sense? We have to give enough space in the last name and in the first name to have very, very long names. And I'm thinking at least 20 characters each. So something like 40 characters for a last name and about 40 characters for first names. right? Because you never know. There's cultures that have very long names. My real name is not Tom, by the way. It's Anastasios, right? Yeah, right? It's 12 letters or something like that. My last name is already pretty long, right? Tsiopoulos. So Anastasios Tsiopoulos is really a mouthful. Tom makes sense, right? In fact, I was always thinking about, like, digress again. Tsiopoulos, change that. It really means like sentry or guard or vanguard. And I was thinking about saying Tom Vanguard. Then I was like, yeah, it's too American, right? So, so that's what I was thinking about. So that's this. It's mostly done. Let's keep going with email address. Now, email address is interesting, email text field. And if you look on the right here, it says content type is email. If you scroll down, there is an email content type, right? Email address, right? And if you look here, the keyboard type is also, you can also specify email address. This is very important for mobile devices, as when you specify email address, it comes up with only the email keyboard, right? For the @ sign and some common email formats, .com and some other things. Username. So username text field is what I'm going to type on. I'm going to go here, and again, I'm going to scroll down, and you can see that there's going to be a username that I'm going to use here, right? And then I'm going to click on password text field, and I'm going to select, when it allows me to, new password. This is important, new password, right? Because it's not the password, it's a new password that we're entering. So there's new password, okay? And for the keyboard type, I'm leaving it alone. One thing I don't want with my password and everything else is I don't want correction. So no, please don't correct me on my password. Same thing with my username. I'm going to go back to that. And I don't want spell checking. Okay, please do not put those in, or else it'll cause a lot of issues. And the other one is secure text entry. Even when you add in or register your password for the first time, it should have these options. Let's go back to username for a second. The username text field, again, should have no correction. So please don't correct me, no autocorrect, and definitely no spell check. Okay, I don't want any of those two things. Next, let's go into confirm password, and let's do the same thing. So again, I'm going to put in new password as the type. Here's new password. The correction is going to be no. The spell checking is going to be no. And I'm going to also say that it's a secure text entry. Click on that, please. And that gives me most of the things that I want for my storyboard within reason. You can go crazy here and do more. I'm not doing more. I'm having trouble as it is, as you can clearly see. Now, this is where it's going to really slow down. I need the assistant editor to do my linking. Let's do that next. Okay? So again, to do that, I'm going to hide, I said, part of Xcode. We can even hide this part, which is my outliner. Okay? And then I'm going to go here, and when I talk about the assistant editor, we're just going to click assistant. And whatever this is linked to, right, it's going to connect to it. All right, so this is my register view controller. You can see that clearly. These are good things. And what I want to do when it allows me, it's not allowing me right now, I want to go in and drag and drop from the register view controller into the storyboard, okay? Because that's an easier connection than control drag. All right, control drag, hard to do sometimes, so it's easier for us to do it this way. We can also, when it allows me to do so, close off the this part right here. There we go. And we can scroll up to the top of our application. Let's see. And so here's the first name. Now, what I did for you guys, because I went through this process already, I organized it in the exact way. Notice it says like first name, last name. That's why you asked me why I did this way. First name, blah, blah, blah. Because then it's easier for me just to drag over. Sometimes you do this. You're like, this is over here, and don't do that. Make it easy for yourself, right? So what I mean by that is, if you go here and you drag over to first name and let go, it should make that connection, okay? Well, we're going to wait now because I'm waiting. I'm in a holding pattern, but you understand what I'm saying. Easily, we would have been done like long ago, all right? Because this is not a complex, this is not complex stuff. Come on. Do the rest. Okay? Don't wait for me. Connect them. Okay? Now, let me talk about if I somehow time out or if I lose access. Here's what I want you guys to do for your login. You need some kind of label at the top. You need username, password, and I also want a little like thing that says, don't have an account,
Yeah.
register, kind of thing, right? And the register should be a button with a different style, like, that hollow button that looks like a link, right? That one. And at the bottom in the middle, I would put a little login button, all right? That's what I would do. Connect all those things up, okay? Now we need segues, things that we don't have. We need segues between the login and the register page, segue. We need a segue between the login and the data view controller, all right? And all that has to be in place. And then we're good to go. We actually make this work. I can tell you what to do right now. All right, let's see if we can actually get in there and do this thing. Okay, finally. It's super slow. Like I said, it's going to slow down immensely when I do this.
And our login page should be the entry point of the app.
The login page should be the entry point of the app, not the register page, which I can fix if ever I get access to this insanity. Luckily, this is only the first time this has happened, right? This semester. I don't experience it that often, to be honest, right? And I'm going to disconnect and reconnect. Come on, little pokey. Oh, yeah. So this is definitely my Mac, 100%. I've isolated the trouble. It's not my internet connection. It's my Mac. My Mac is doing something, right? It's doing some indexing. It's doing something in the background, right?
You can see the task about
Yeah, that's one of the top.
Which task? This thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. Well, anyways, you know what you have to do, right? So that's what you do. Then run the app. It should work, all right? So the way it works is, again, for in-class exercise 6, login screen should be entry screen. All the segues, if you look inside the login view controller, they're already named. Please name the segue the right name, right? The segue identifier, right? Because every segue has to be named. For the when you go from the login view controller to the data view controller, please do a detail segue. The detail segue is different than the show segue. Very, very different. So please use that type. All right. It's a better way of looking at it. It looks better for your application. Like it literally is frozen. Now. And I mean, even if I wanted to reboot my system, right? I could do it at this point because I literally have zero functionality. So I'm just telling you what to do, guys. That's what you need to do. All right?
It's the username and the password that we need for login.
Sorry?
Username and password were the only two ones.
In the login view controller, let me go and let me show you on what you have. I can't show you because I'm too slow right now. I'm so sorry. Right? But if you look at the, I'm just going to exit full screen, and I'm just going to go here to the gists. You can see here that I've given you several gists, right? So one of them is the login view controller. So if you look at the login view controller from that, right? We can also look at the code this way, right? It tells you, it informs you that you need a username, user text field, and a password text field. Make sure the password text field is just like the other ones, which is it has to hide the password. Can't show the password like those other things I configured, right? And then you need a couple of buttons. Take a look at this, right? So there's one button that is the login button pressed event. So you must have a login button, and there must be a register button too. So here's the register button right here. The register button pressed event right here. Okay? So you have your register button and you have your login button. The register button has to say, maybe next to some kind of label that says, don't have an account, register, right? Don't have an account will be a label, register will be next to it, okay? And I'm not gonna do it because of time. I already have this application built. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually close Xcode and open up my other application and show you what it's gonna look like, okay?
Which segue was the detail one? The one
From the login view controller to the data view controller.
data view.
Because that makes sense. The data view controller is your movie list, right? So that's a different look, right? So let's see if I can do that. I'm gonna go here and I'm just gonna close off Xcode here. And I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna show you, I'm gonna open up Xcode again. And I have this other application that I have here that I'm gonna run. When it allows me to. And the other application is the built application. I already did this. I've already built it. I just can't push it right now. I'm having problems. And it's 6:36. I'm not going to finish on time, guaranteed, because it took me this long to make one view controller. I got to make another one. So I'm just going to show it to you when I have access.
Also, the data view controller is going to have the login
The what?
button.
Yes, I also have to have on the data view controller, there's one button that's missing, which is going to be a logout button. It's going to be a red little button next to the other one. So on the right hand, I have the plus button to add. On the left side, I'm going to make an X button that's red, and it's going to basically be the logout button. Okay, I need that too. So I'm going to show you this in a second when I get access. And again, I'm loath to restart the machine because I think that's the problem, personally, but I'm just going to try and disconnect and reconnect. Hopefully it's going to help me.
In the login page, the passwords, content type would be password itself.
Yep. One day when I actually can get this done. Come on. Xcode, Xcode, Xcode. Yeah, I think it's like, look, see how this is not opening? I think it's like Xcode has a problem. Like it actually is functional. I'm having a problem with my Mac. So we're going to close off some stuff. But it's doing there's some kind of function it's doing right now, and like even forced quitting is hard. Sure, quit it. And it's just a problem. Anyways, I do apologize. It does happen. If I could do it with your Mac, I'd do it. It would be done by now. And I'm just going to restart my application. I'm so sorry about this, guys, but we're going to just restart the Mac. Now, I'm going to be offline for a bit when this happens. So I can't show you what's going to happen, but it's going to take its time while it's restarting. Okay, so back to what I want you guys to do, right? Because I'm running out of time. You guys should be able to do it anyway. I've given you the login view controller and the register view controller. Really, what the thing is, this is practice for your next week anyway, right? So again, if I was going to draw it out, let's draw it out, right? And I'll draw just so you understand the connections. Okay, so we can do this locally on my PC, right? So if you look at the let's suppose this is the login view controller, right? Then the login view controller, right, is going to be the entry point. So this is the entry point, right? I haven't made that. I erroneously, because of my problem that I had, right, I made the register view controller erroneously the one. It should be the login view controller. Login view controller. And that should be the entry point for my application. Okay, so this is this thing. Okay, the login view controller is going to have one link that's going to point to my register controller, and I recommend that you put the register controller like somewhere underneath here. When you're actually planning your app, I recommend that. Like put the register controller somewhere down here, okay? And it's not to scale clearly, but this is where the register controller would be. Then you're going to make a segue that goes from this controller to this controller. That's the segue that you're going to make. This segue is going to be the regular show segue, all right? That's the segue, all right? And usually this segue is going to be called, because this is the register controller, the register segue, all right? So this is the register segue, right? And the register segue is going to go to the register controller, register view controller, okay? So this register segue. Sorry, I can't draw it very well, but it is what it is. Trying. And then what we want to have is the entry point, which is your login view controller, is going to have a second segue. Okay, this is kind of the first time we're doing this kind of thing, right? Where the second segue is going to go from here to your data view controller over here. Okay, this is where I would put it, the data view controller. So here's the data view controller. I put that over here. This is what we already have, the existing view controllers. We have one and we have two, okay, with these two controllers, right? So again, this is the data view controller. Let's call it the data VC, just to be quick, because we're running out of time. And this one is the add, edit, view controller, this one here. So let's put that in. So this is the add, edit, VC, okay? So the add, edit, view controller is this one. Okay, that's how I would lay it out, like this, okay? And then you would have another segue. You have another segue right now that goes from the data view controller to the add edit controller. That's how it goes right now. And this is what I would set up. This is using, there's no navigation controller here, all right? There's no embedding. It's just one segue to the other, all right? With the entry point being here, the entry point is going to have the arrow that goes here, like this, is where it's going to go. This is where the arrow is going to happen, here. This one, okay? So that's how it's going to look. And again, this one will be a detail segue. This one will be a show segue. This one is a show segue, all right? So the only detail segue is this one. This is what I would consider. And this segue here would be the data segue, I think is what it's called, okay? And once you have that all in place, you should be able to run your app, log in, because the login view controller is complete, the data view controller is complete, the registers controller is complete, everything is complete, all right? So it should work for you, okay? And let me just check to see, and I highly doubt it, whether it's come back online. It's probably not. And the way you check this with remote desktop is if you sees it online, oh my God, it's there. That's crazy. Either, here's what happened. Either it didn't turn off, it didn't restart, right, which is possible. And I know the second because it won't give me my log. Oh no, it actually did it. Oh my God. Oh no, now it's going to log me off. See, I can't do it. So now it's logged me off, right?
Oh, you left the thing before it finished its log on?
No. So if I go back to my remote desktop, right? It's going to connect forever, right? Because it's still setting up its thing, right? And it can connect and connect and connect, and it may in fact never start. Like I said. And the reason why this is happening is because it's starting all the processes again on the system, right? So now we're going to wait another length of time until finally it comes up again. It's going to take its time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So we don't have time to wait for this. But is everyone clear on what I want you guys to do? This is what it should look like. I'm sorry I can't show it to you any better than this. but it's a good test for you for next week, right? And so what's happening is, let's go back just to finish this off, this talk off. So the login view controller, it has a username and password. There's going to be another little thing that says that's missing that I haven't put into place, which is a little button here for register. The register button's like right here, all right? It'll say something like no account, question mark, and then there's a button that says register. And that register button will do the segue that goes to the register over here, this register segue. That's what it's going to do, okay? And then there's going to be another button down here somewhere, which is going to be the login button, all right? It doesn't have to be that far down, but further down. And then that button is going to do this segue, which is going to go to the data view controller. It's going to look at the username and password you put in. If your username and password is correct, then it should just take you to the thing. And in the inside the debug view, it should say user logged in successfully. Okay, there's actually like a little print statement I made, right? If your username, if you didn't register and you try and put in your username and password, it's going to say user doesn't exist, right, or whatever, or a problem with logging in, username or password incorrect. It's going to say to you, right? That's what it's going to say, okay? If you try and register a user twice, it's going to say registration failed, and then it'll give you a little message that says, user already exists. Okay, that's what it's going to say. All right. And if you put in your email, your password in, and the first one is 12345, and the second one is 1234556, it's going to say username or password incorrect. It won't allow you to do it, right? Only when you put everything in properly will it allow you to do the things that it has to do. Okay. And then it'll take you to your data view controller. When your data view controller goes back, if you click the X button should appear on the top left corner. So there's two buttons. There's the X button, right? And on the right here, there's a plus button. The plus button will do a segue to the add edit view controller. The X button is new, and it'll log out. It'll perform the logout procedure, logout button pressed, and it'll dismiss the segue. It'll clear up the login page. It'll call the clear login text fields function. That's what it'll call from the login view controller. It'll clear those up and go back to the login page. Okay? Let's see if I'm back in. My God. It's probably not back in. Let's just do this. The best way to check. Oh, it is back in. My God. I can't believe it. Let's see what happens. All right. Let's see if I'm any faster than before. So this then is an internet problem now. Because normally it resolves itself, and it's not resolving itself, which means it's not my Mac problem, it's an internet problem. So that means either internet at home or here. Those are the two options. Yep. Yep. Okay. Questions before we go for the day? So things to do for the in-class exercise number 6, okay, is you need to finish off the iOS application, and I want you to do the exact same thing in Android. Take your Android application and then add in, the same stuff on the Android side, which means you need some kind of login screen. You need some kind of register screen. You need an extra button to log out. You need a button to log in. You need to do the intent to take you from one screen to the other, right? All those kind of things. And remember that you need to set up the same kind of entities, the same kind of way, but different on the room side, right? You need to have a user model. You have to set that up. All those things that you did before on Android, you got to do again, okay? And then it should just work fine. Remember that on Android, it might be slightly different, but the only differences are the way it does the check, the way it does the fetching, the way it does the comparing. Come on, little pokey. So my button clicks don't register. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a combination of. I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna try it and it's gonna work perfect,
Yeah.
right? That's gonna happen. I just can't even do anything with Xcode right now. Okay, does that make sense? So that's what your job is for in-class exercise 6. One thing is also, I'm just gonna leave this to do its business because we need to finish off today because we're overtime already. One thing also, again, please keep in mind the assignment 2 due date, which is this Sunday at midnight, okay? I recommend fixing this assignment 2 as soon as possible. Some people have already done it. They've finished, right? Finish today, finish tomorrow, get it done. It's worth 5%. Your in-class exercise worth 4%. That's 9% of your final grade this week, right? So get it done, get those 2 done. And then you're set up for 20% of your final grade next week. All right, so that's what I would recommend. Again, just a reminder, Monday there will be I won't be here, I won't be at the school next week. We'll do things remote. I will release your midterm test on Monday morning. You'll have until Friday afternoon, Friday at midnight, to get it done. I recommend targeting Thursday. I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm doing it for a reason, for those people who didn't watch the first video and then are really bored with the second video because they watched me try to fool around with my Mac, which is dead, right? Questions around anything we talked about today? It should be fairly straightforward. Did you make it work, by the way? Anybody? It works, no problem?
No problem.
That was all my hard work, right? Trying to get it to work. Because if I didn't do that, yeah. Okay? So please do that. It should not be an issue. Really, what you could do, again, like I talked about before, ChatGPT or Stack Overflow is your friend. You take the code, the view controller that I've given you, and put it into ChatGPT and say, do one for Android. It'll do it for you, 2 seconds. Right? And tell them what you want to do. I want to have a login controller and this controller, and put in everything you want into ChatGPT. It'll do everything for you. I'll tell you right now, with ChatGPT, I've been able to code at least 3 or 4 times faster than normal. Okay? And I'm not joking. Not because I'm a bad coder, but because I can simply just say something like, I want this. No, I want this. No, change this. No, I want this. Okay, good. That's great. Test it. Oh, it doesn't work. This doesn't work. Do this. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's how you do it. Good. Change this, put it in, and done. And literally, it'll save me hours of time. Okay? Like I said, I wrote a whole NPM module in a day. I couldn't do that in days if I was going to look it up, how to do it online, right? So, I mean, it's huge. So I recommend it. And I'm not shying away from it. I recommend doing it. But do it with caution. Do it with care. And make sure that it's working and doing what you want it to do. Okay? Any questions before we go for the day? I'm going to stop recording now. Guys, I apologize for the kerfuffle we had today, but it is what it is. And the show must go on, as they say. That's why I gave you the gists. That's why I've given you all the code. And there should be nothing that stops you from completing your app. Okay? I'll see you guys next week on Monday morning. I will be online. So if you need me, I will be on as early as 8 a.m. All right? Take care. Have a great weekend. And see you next week.